Hi, welcome to Jim's Orbit. In this video, we'll be applying gradients and some other effects to shapes, and then later on we'll work with text. So I'll first draw a simple shape using the pen tool and fill some color in it. Select it and go to the gradient tool on the toolbar. You'll see that this gradient section appears in the properties panel. Click on this icon with the three dots. Ensure that the gradient is being applied to the fill and not to the stroke. These are some template gradients that you can choose from. These circles are basically nodes representing different colors that you can move around to achieve different gradients. This is a simple linear gradient, but you can still move or tilt the axis around. The preset that I chose from the default gradients had 4 colors, but I can always add more colors or remove them. To change a color, just double click on the node. To add a color, click anywhere on the slider, and to delete, just use the delete icon here on the right. You can also change the opacity for each of these. Now, instead of a gradient in which all the colors are placed linearly, you could also go for a radial gradient by clicking on the second icon in the gradient section. And just like that, you can tweak the spread of your color. The third kind of gradient is called freeform gradient, in which you can place your points wherever you want in any freeform fashion. To edit each point, you just have to double click and then you can change the color and opacity. I think freeform tool is a really cool tool that you didn't have in the earlier versions. Now this was about gradients, but there are a ton of other effects that you can apply to your shapes from the effects menu on the top. These here are various artistic effects that you can choose from. Let me show you how to apply a simple Gaussian blur. With this slider, you can just change how much blur you want to apply. You could also warp your shape in multiple ways. These are the multiple styles that you can choose from. You can also mess around with the bend and the distortion. Next, you can also apply a shadow to your shape. You can change the color of the shadow. You can choose how far you want your shadow to fall using the X and the Y offsets. You can also change the blending mode for your shadow and the opacity. Next, you can also apply an outer glow to your shape. You can choose any color for your glow and change the blending mode, opacity, and the blur for the glow. I've zoomed in a bit so you can see a faint turquoise glow on the shape. Next, let's go to free distort. You can just freely distort your shape by grabbing onto these 4 corners and moving them around however you want. You can also tweak or twist your shape. Lastly, let me show you another cool effect called transform. For that, let me create a new layer first. We want to create a flower using the same shape that we've been working with. What you can obviously do is create copies of it and then keep rotating them to achieve the shape of a flower. Now the same thing can be achieved by using an effect. Go to the effects menu, distort and transformed, and choose the transform effect. This effect lets you create your own repeating patterns. Let's first set how many copies we want in our pattern. Next, you can mess around with how much angle there should be between each of these repeating objects. From here, you can choose the direction in which your pattern should move. Making use of these multiple settings, you can come up with pretty cool looking shapes and patterns. This was about effects and gradients. Now let's work with some text. Let's go to the text tool here on the toolbar. Just click and drag your text box. Now this is just the sample text that you're seeing here. You can erase it and type your own. You can change the font size, font style, alignment of your text. You can also align it to, say, the center of the artboard. You can also change the weight for your font, make it regular, italic, semi-bold or bold, depending on the font. You can also change its color, of course. To increase the spacing between each letter, also known as tracking, you can click here. I'll just keep it to the default 0. which was how the font maker originally intended it to look like. But of course, you can change it to suit any specific needs of yours. To quickly capitalize all letters, you can click here. You could also make your text superscript, subscript, underlined, or make a strike through. If you're working with multiple lines, you can change the spacing between each line from here. You can convert your text to outlines by right-clicking and then selecting Create Outlines. What this does is basically take the information of the font away from your text. So even though it will look like the same font, but it will be treated like a vector object. So this will now be a graphic element and not text. Now you could transform it however you want. You could format it or edit specific anchor points as well. You could round off the corners or also apply all these effects that we talked about earlier. Now let's say you're working with simple text and you want it to be wrapped around a certain path or a shape, and you cannot achieve it using all these effects. What you can do is use text wrapping. First, let's draw a shape, then pick up the text tool. As you hover the cursor over the shape, you will see that the cursor changes. When that happens, you can just press down Alt on your keyboard and click on the path. As you can see, the sample text is now wrapped around the path. Instead of just being linear, you can then type your text and rotate it. For more options, let's go to the Type menu and click on Type on a Path and then on Type on a Path options. You can try changing the effect, flipping it, or changing the ground line for your text. Now you can just click on the text or the path as well to see all the formatting options for your text. You can now change the font size, font style, and color for your text. So that's it about the basics of text and text wrapping. I hope you're finding these tutorials helpful and that you are a little more familiar with the basics of the graphic design software. You can always comment any queries or any thoughts that you have. From the next video onwards, we'll be beginning with our section 2 of the series, where we will be creating multiple designs. Tune in for all the fun stuff that is yet to come. Thanks for watching.